Welcome back. Here's a coach report. It's time to take a look at something very, very special to me, very close to my heart, and that's Deadline magazine. That's right. We are going to take a deep dive into Deadline magazine, the British anthology that roared onto the scene in 1998 and left an indelible mark by 1995. Now, this wasn't just a comic. No, 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 no. It was a cultural Molotov cocktail, blending punk rock rebellion, indie music vibes, and groundbreaking stories like Tank Girl. In this comprehensive history, we'll trace its origins, dissect its standout content, explore its influence on British and American comics, and unpack its enduring legacy. So, grab a cuppa and a packet of custard creams because we're about to travel back to the world of 80s British comic rebellion. So, to understand Deadline, we need to transport ourselves way back to 1988 Britain. The comics landscape was polarised. 2000 AD delivered gritty sci-fi with Judge Dredd, while the Beano and Eagle targeted kids with wholesome gags. Across the Atlantic, Marvel and DC churned out superhero sagas for the masses, but a restless energy was brewing among creators who felt constrained by these formats. Enter Brett Ewins and Steve Dillon, two 2000 AD artists with a vision for something entirely new. A magazine that spoke to adults, fused comics with raw pulse of the post-punk and indie music scenes, and embraced a counter-cultural ethos. Ewins and Dillion weren't starting from scratch. No, no, no. Their earlier project, Strange Days, was a short-lived anthology with Brendan McCarthy and Peter Milligan, and that had already explored mature, experimental storytelling. But Deadline was their magnum opus. Launched in October 1988 by Deadline Publication Limited, it was bankrolled by Tom Astor, a wealthy patron with a rebellious streak, whose grandmother was the trailblazing politician Nancy Astor. The magazine's name, Deadline, was a tongue-in-cheek nod to the pressures of publishing, but it also captured its urgent, in-your-face attitude. Priced at £1.50, with a bold magazine format mixing glossy colour and gritty black and white pages, it stood out on newsstands as something defiantly different. And it really did. That's what got me. Deadline was a love letter to the late 80s. Alternative scenes. Think Manchester's rave culture, the jangle of the Stone Roses, and the DIY spirit of fanzines. It wasn't just a comic. It was a cultural artifact targeting readers who haunted indie gigs and record shops, not just comic stores. Ewins and Dillion, as founding editors, created a space where creators could take risks, free from the corporate constraints of mainstream publishers. Their mission was clear: make comics that felt like a night out at a sweaty club, not a sanitized superhero showdown. At its core, Deadline was a melting pot of comics, music journalism, and cultural commentary. Each issue was a vibrant collage. Comic strips sat alongside band interviews, gig reviews, and musings of fashion, nightlife, and politics. It was like flipping through a punk zine, a music mag, and an art journal all at once. But the comics were the heartbeat, delivering stories that were audacious, irreverent, and unlike anything else in the market. Let's dive into some of the favourites. So, the undisputed star was obviously Tank Girl, created by Jamie Hewlett and Adam Martin. Introduced in Deadline's debut issue, she was Tank Girl, a chain-smoking, tank-driving anarchist in a surreal post-apocalyptic Australia. With a shaved head, mutant kangaroo boyfriend, and penchant for chaos, she was the embodiment of punk rebellion. Hewlett's art, bursting with kinetic energy and nods to Jack Kirby's bold lines, paired perfectly with Martin's absurdist scripts. Tank Girl became Deadline's mascot, driving sales and fetching, nowadays, $80 to $150 for the early issues. So it wasn't just a comic, it was a cultural phenomenon, inspiring everything from fashion to zine art. But Tank Girl was only the beginning. Johnny Nemo by Peter Milligan and Brett Ewins offered a darkly comedic take on a futuristic Private Eye, blending noir cynicism with punk swagger. Imagine a detective who'd rather slam a pint than solve a case, navigating a dystopian London with a smirk. Philip Bond's Wild Will was a pop art fever dream, skewering consumer culture with vibrant visuals and biting wit. Shaky Kane's Amen and Space Boss dove into psychedelic sci-fi, mixing cosmic weirdness with a satirical edge that mocked authority at every turn. Meanwhile, Nick Abadaz's Hugo Tate took a quieter approach, following a lost soul through stark, minimalist tales of existential drift. So Deadline also opened a window to American indie comics, reprinting works like Love and Rockets by Los Bros Hernandez, with the poignant tales of Latinx punks. The Bob's Burden's Flaming Carrot was a bizarre superhero parody too. Even Dorkin's Milk and Cheese brought slapstick nihilism, featuring a deranged carton of milk and a wedge of cheese on a rampage. These strips introduced UK readers to the raw, personal storytelling of the American underground, broadening the scope of what comics could be. Deadline's magic lay in its ability to fuse comics with the pulse of the alternative music scene. This wasn't a comic for traditional fans, it was for the misfits who crowded gigs, collected vinyl, and lived for the underground. Jamie Hewlett's friendship with Blur Damon's Albarn led to crossovers, like Blur members appearing in Tank Girl strips, blurring the lines between comics and music. Covers showcase bands like Ride, Curve, and Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, drawing in readers who'd never touched a comic but grabbed Deadline for its music coverage. This synergy reflected the cultural movement. The late 80s and early 90s were electric. Manchester's rave scene, the rise of Britpop, the DIY ethos of punk fanzines. Deadline bottled their energy, offering a visual and narrative counterpart to the music. Its zine-like aesthetic, rough edges, eclectic layouts, and a mix of prose and art felt handmade, authentic, and alive. As editor Dave Elliott, who succeeded Ewins, and Dillion noted, "We wanted Deadline to feel like you were flipping through someone's chaotic, brilliant scrapbook." The magazine became a talent hub, nurturing creators who'd shaped comics for decades. Warren Ellis brought his sharp, cynical voice to early strips, a precursor on his work on Transmetropolitan. Brian Bolland's meticulous art added polish to the magazine's grit, while Shaky Kane's surreal visuals pushed boundaries. These creators honed a distinctly British sensibility, wry, rebellious, and unafraid to offend, that would influence the industry far beyond Deadline's pages. Deadline's influence wasn't confined to the UK. It crossed the Atlantic with force. Under Dave Elliott's editorship, Deadline partnered with Dark Horse Comics to publish Deadline USA, bringing strips like Tank Girl and Johnny Nemo to American readers. This exposed US audiences to British creators' unique blend of humour and anarchy, while Deadline's reprints of American indie comics like Love and Rockets and Flaming Carrot introduced UK readers to the underground scene. This two-way exchange was a turning point for indie comics. Now, in the US, Deadline's unpolished, anti-establishment vibe resonated with creators who were tired of superhero dominance. Peter Bagge's Hate, with its slacker angst, and Daniel Clow's 8-Ball, with its introspective weirdness, echoed Deadline's ethos. Publishers like Fantagraphic and Drawn and Quarterly, which became indie giants, drew inspiration from Deadline's willingness to take risks. The magazine's influence helped fuel the 90s indie comics boom, alongside the rise of Image Comics and DC Vertigo's imprint, which leaned into mature, unconventional stories. Deadline also pioneered cross-media storytelling. Jamie Hewlett's Tank Girl aesthetic, bold, chaotic, and pop culture saturated, directly informed his work on Gorillaz, the virtual band he co-created with Damon Albarn. This blend of comics, music, and animation was revolutionary, foreshadowing how comics would infiltrate TV, film, and digital media. From Deadpool's irreverent humour to Doom Patrol's surreal TV adaptation, Deadline's DNA is in every project that dares to mix genres and defy norms. But despite its brilliance, Deadline faced headwinds by the mid-90s. The alternative scene it embodied was losing its edge as Britpop went mainstream, with bands like Oasis and Blur dominating pop culture. The 1995 Tank Girl film, dedicated by Rachel Talalay, was a commercial and critical misfire, failing to capture the strip's anarchic soul despite a cult following. As Deadline's flagship character, Tank Girl's Hollywood stumble hurt the magazine's brand. Financially, Deadline struggled to scale. Its niche audience, devoted but small, couldn't offset rising costs with production. And printing a magazine with colour pages, freelance contributors, and a non-mainstream focus was expensive, and competition from large publishers squeezed its margins. By September 1995, after 71 issues, Deadline ceased publication. Brett Ewins and Steve Dillon moved on to other projects, with Dillon later gaining fame for Preacher. The magazine's creators dispersed, but their influence lingered. Yet Deadline refused to stay dead. In the 2010s, Miss Deadline revived its spirit with new stories. And this year, 2025, the A1 Deadline Summer Special, backed by a Kickstarter campaign and spearheaded by Chris Northrop and Dave Elliott, will bring fresh work from creators like Steve Pugh, Mark Nelson, Bill Seiswick, Rufus Dayglo, Ron Marz, Shaky Kane, Ronald Marcellius, Toby Cypress, and Kevin Eastman, alongside posthumous contributions from Steve Dillon. Deadline's legacy is a testament to its revolutionary spirit. It proved comics could take mature themes and give them to the masses. That young youth that's looking for everything you could possibly want in a magazine: sex, drugs, politics, while staying playful and subversive. Its influence is in every boundary-pushing comic, from Hellblaze's occult grit to the Umbrella Academy's quirky chaos. It nurtured the British invasion, with creators like Warren Ellis and Grant Morrison carrying its irreverence to American publishers. It also expanded comics' audience, drawing in music fans and cultural rebels who saw Deadline as a manifesto for their values. The magazine's cross-media impact is undeniable. Jamie Hewlett's Gorillaz, a global phenomenon, owes its visual language to Tank Girl. Deadline's fusion of comics and culture paved the way for modern storytelling, where comics inspire films, TV, and digital art. Collectors still chase its back issues, with early Tank Girl appearances commanding premium prices, and its punk ethos continues to inspire indie creators who see comics as a space for freedom and defiance. Deadline was more than a magazine. It was a rebellion on paper. From Tank Girl's anarchy to Wild World's satire, it gave us stories that were fearless, weird, and utterly original. It bridged comics and music, sparked an indie revolution, and left a legacy that still shapes the medium. If you've never read Deadline, track down these back issues online or support the A1 Deadline Summer Special on Kickstarter when it launches. I know I will. Anyway, this is Deadline. It's something that stayed with me since day one. It absolutely shaped what I look for in comics. And I'm so excited to hear that it is coming back in A1 Deadline. Now, I'm going to cover A1 Deadline when everything's announced, from the Kickstarter to anything else that they put out. It's going to be amazing. I thoroughly recommend every single person backs it, because this book needs to come back and it needs to make the impact it made all those years ago, especially on this guy. So thank you very much for listening. Please like the video if you like the video. Please subscribe if you want to hear more stories about comics. I'd really appreciate it. But until next time, read more comics.